Hello, and welcome to Hanratty on Karate. So most of the subjects I have during these podcasts come up mainly through inquiries from people or questions from my students. So I was teaching a bunch of white belts last week, and of course, when you're teaching beginners, generally you start off with stances. Well, actually, I start off with teaching them how to breathe, and then I go into how to make a fist and stuff like this. But stances are a very essential and necessary part of beginner training, and it's quite ponderous at the start when you're telling them the basics of the stance, how to perform the stance and what it's for. And this was the question I got asked. What is it for? Because when you see people in combat situations or confrontational situations, even in karate competitions, you don't really see the stances. And that's true, you don't. Because stances are transitory. There's two conditions you need in a confrontational situation. One is mobility and the other is stability. Now, the stability you need while you're delivering a technique, such as a punch or a block. The mobility you need if you're delivering a technique like a kick. Now, you can't have both. You can't be mobile and be stable at the same time. It just goes against the grain, right? It's in physical impossibility. You're either mobile or you're stable. Stable is standing still. But the stances are transitory, which means that they're there for a split second while your technique is delivered, whatever the technique is, and whatever the stance you use to deliver that technique. So having observed a lot of fights, refereed hundreds and hundreds of fights whilst refereeing and been in quite a lot of competitions, I've found that probably the closest that kumite stances come to basic stances is a cross between furudachi and kokotsudachi, in other words, like rooted stance or back stance. And this is the one you kind of bounce in and out of whilst you're moving. You very rarely see kosudachi. You just probably won't see kibadachi. You may see nekowashi, where a person will pull back the front leg to change the distance and then immediately drop into front stance to regain the distance for a counter strike, which is an exercise I use a lot of. Squeeze back into nekowashi whilst blocking and then catch the person as he's still coming in or as he's retracting his technique and make your counter. Timing's really important in this, and what you need to do is, really push the power down onto the back leg so you get like a plyometric effect, pushing down on the back leg, almost like compressing a spring and then driving the body forward, create momentum for power in your technique. But the stances as a whole, even though we teach them and they're a basic part of everybody's basic karate, don't really mean that much. They're there as a platform for you to deliver your technique, and you need a strong platform when you're doing anything. You need a strong foundation, and basically that's what they are. And so explaining this to the students really made me think about it and how important it is. Besides just building up leg strength and using the discipline in the class, keeping your knee over your toe in front stance and knee over your back toe in back stance. These are the simple things in understanding the stances. And then if you ever trained with Nishiyama or did any of his instructional courses, he always differentiated in his stances by having an outside tension stance and an inside tension stance. And an outside tension stance would kind of mean that you'd almost feel like you were flexing the hips outward while applying downward pressure. So it's outside tension, downward pressure. And a number of these stances fit into this category, like kibadachi, zenkotsudachi, kokotsudachi, furudachi. They're all outside tension stances, just generally, right? Shikodachi, of course. Now, inside tension stances tend to be higher, and with inside tension stances, the weight's dropped, the same as it is in outside tension stances. Knees are pulled in and then lifting the pelvis up. So the pressure's from the inside and up rather than outside and down. And they're quite strong stances. And you have the likes of Sanshin, Nekowashi, like cat stance, and Getsudachi, of course. These are all inside tension stances, and they're all involved in kata. Now, in kata, stances are extremely important because you want to show the technique and the smoothness of the technique and the flow of the kata, and you're moving from one stance to another. Basically, kata is technique in motion, basic techniques in motion, rather than just on the floor. You're taking your basics and you're putting them in motion in imaginary situations that might or might never occur, usually never, and showing you how good your technique would be if that ever occurred, if the situation ever occurred. So are they necessary? Because you don't see them in sports karate at all, except in kata, all right? And then they're over-exaggerated, and people bypass the transitory part of the stance, and they'll hold it for, 4 or 5 seconds just to show the judges that they have a good stance. But that's not the purpose of stance. Stances are transitory, and you move from one to the other almost seamlessly if you can, to provide a platform for the technique you're moving into, you want to deliver at a given time. Okay, whether it be squeezing back in Nakawash for a blocking technique, powering forward for an attacking technique, say in Zenkutsu Dachi, or just dropping your weight and holding really steady like in Sanshin or Fudodachi. So that's what the stances are for. Now, whether they suit the purpose is another question altogether. And we know that they're good for building up legs and building strength and moving and getting people to move from one position to the other almost seamlessly and without effort in order to deliver the techniques. So they're really good if you're using something like taisabaki in a drill where you want to shift your body to the side to evade an attack or a technique, and then you can bang back in onto your stance, and again, there we go. And switching the directions of your stance, even if it's the same stance, like we're switching from Zenkutsu, say facing front, 90 degrees to the right, still in Zenkutsu. What we're doing is we're just planting down and really moving it well. So a drill I developed quite a long time ago, actually, is starting from front stance in a basic blocking position. And what we're going to do is we're going to go round 4 or 5 stances in a little basic square method. I use this in my higher up gradings just to check how fast and sharp. Also, how fast a person turns from one stance into another, keeping balance, keeping eye direction, moving smoothly with strength and power is a sign of what to look for in advanced kata, okay? Most people can do a kata, but there's no such thing as a beginner kata and advanced kata, all right? An athlete that's moderately trained can probably perform unsu, the jumping unsu, which seems to be a big rave with American audiences. They all applaud it and everything else. But it's not that hard. A ballet dancer could do that with 5 minutes of looking at it. What you're looking for is the strength and the command of the body, range of motion within the technique and within the stances. So as I say, there's no such thing as an advanced kata. The thing that makes a kata advanced is the person doing it. Okay, is that person advanced enough to understand it, to understand the nuances and what's it for, what's inside it, what it means. And this is obvious when you have put a sandan, say, against somebody who's supposed to know the kata, say, going for the 8th kyu or yellow belt and doing Heian Shodan, and you do a sandan doing Heian Shodan. Now, there should be an amazing difference in that. There should be an amazing difference, actually, if somebody's just a Shodan or a first kyu between the guy that's going for his 8th and the first. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. And I've come across clubs where I've been invited to sit on the grading panel and watch people, and they'll do the kata that they're doing for the grading, and the instructor or the people on the panel will say, well, is there anything else? And I'll say, yeah, can you show me Heian Shodan or show me Heian Nidan? And they've completely forgotten it because they think it's no longer there, it's no longer useful. It's like forgetting your basics. It's like forgetting how to switch the engine on before you drive the car. This is basics. The stances are basics. So the stance drill that I developed over the years, or designed, starts off left leg forward in front stance, step forward, oisuki, nice straight stance. And in this instance, what we're going to do is we're going to move the feet in sequence. So we go right, left, right, left, right, left, just like you're marching. So then you're going to turn. So you do 270 turn, almost like you do in Heian Shodan. But you turn and you land in Kibadachi, making Empiuchi. So you've made Oisuki, turn, Empiuchi. Then we're going to squeeze the feet together. Now we're going right leg forward, Shutouki in Kokutsadachi, knife hand block in back stance. Okay. Again, 270 turn, and we're going to switch down into Fudadachi, making Gidambarai, downward block. Okay. And then getting back to the starting place again, right leg, we make 90-degree turn into Nekowashi, making Uchiuryuki, inside forearm block in cat stance. So that's your box. From cat stance, you drop the heel, step forward with your left side, Oisuki, then go into Empiuchi, Shitouki, Fudadachi, Nekowashi Dachi. So there's, a nice little mix of stances. It's not all the stances, of course, but it's a nice way of doing some basic stances. And basically, you've got the first basic three, plus an inside tension stance and a rooted stance, Fudadachi, to add in there. So you can imagine a little square. You could probably do it around your bathroom, certainly around your living room. So it's just a little square. Some of the students call it Hanratty's box. You can call it what you like. It's a nice little stance drill. And you're hitting the stances hard, with power, with kime, especially on the technique. It's a good introduction to making these stances mean something and making people move from one to the other and showing how transitory it is. So you could even have little races with it, so getting through the stance, but you have to hit everyone, okay? You can't just run through them. You have to hit everyone with power, sharp technique, and then immediately move on to the next one, which is what the stances are for. They enable you to move from one position to the other, either shifting your weight back or forward, or dropping it down into the center, or bringing it up, like in an inside tension stance. So there's lots of things to think about when you're working on stances. And I'm just talking about the basic stances, which are supposed to be fighting stances. I'm not interested in discussing Heisukadashi, Masubi-dachi, Seisa. These are just formal stances, basically for the etiquette in the dojo. A little bit of self-discipline with your class. I do tend to spend a fair amount of time on the kamae position. I'll start it off in Zenkutsu, or front stance with the left leg forward, then just kind of relax the hips so that they drop a little bit, drop the shoulders. The lead hand, if you pull it back, it should touch the top of your cheekbone. And the lower hand, your Gyakusuki hand or your reverse punch hand, bring it back so it just touches your chin. Elbows are in, and there's no space in between. So you can punch straight forward from either hand, and you have a good kamae. You don't want to let anybody in. So you don't want your elbows out, or your arms out, or your hands low. Although some of the early fighters, you see them with the hands hung low, and they're quite effective. Nothing wrong with it. It'll be fast enough. But all of these people were higher grades, and the way that they had their kamae was definitely a form of a feint, encouraging the other person to attack. And dropping the hands down, they wanted them to attack the head, and they obviously felt very confident in protecting that area from the stances that they have. So just a little bit on stances. Find out what they're for, which stance gives you the best opportunities for attack or defense. Learn to use them, move between them smoothly, quickly, effectively. Another thing I say, a basic thing when you're doing kata, if you're turning from one stance into another, which we all turn in kata, you should sink your body just that slightly bit lower, so you drop your center of gravity, helps you maintain your balance as you turn, gives you power. Also, I tend to look on every turn as a throw. Even just a side step to the left in a downward block is a great throwing action. Think about it. Try to put it all into an application that they can use. If you can put a picture in your students' mind, they're going to understand it a lot better. All right? So work on your stances because they're really important. And you don't see them when people are fighting and bouncing around. But look for the moment that they deliver the technique. That's when they need a good base. When you're delivering a technique, that's when you need your platform. See if you can identify the platforms and look at the great fighters like Frank Brown and Ronnie Christopher and these people. The minute that they deliver a technique, you can almost see the stance and they hit it for that split second and then they're mobile again because you're either stable or you're mobile. All right, so that's from me. Any questions, comments, queries, let me know. Talk to you later.